Good morning. My name is John Buchheit. I've been designated as the hearing officer here. I do want to point out just to everyone that I understand that it's being recorded. Is that correct? The proceeding?
Yes.
Okay, so that everyone knows that it's important that the rules around in Massachusetts, as I understand it, around recording is that you need to know when you go into a public meeting and there's a recording happening that everyone needs to be made aware of that. So I might stop the proceeding if someone new comes in just to let them know. So
I'm also recording them from the
you're recording? Okay. All right, that's fine. Thank you. So we've got two recordings.
Sorry, I was not informed prior to now that there would be recordings made. So who is, you are from the Brookline Tab and you are making an audio recording?
Yes.
And who's making this video recording? Can we have that on record?
They're gonna be on, it's the Brookline Cable News.
Who's from the Brookline Cable News here?
They're not here, I was able to retrieve it. They gave me,
Set their camera,
Yeah.
essentially.
right.
Okay. Are we going to have access to copies of the audio and video recordings?
I have to check with my editor about that.
Because I don't understand what the use of it would be. I don't understand why you're recording, what the use of it would be. I'd like to have access, I'd like to have copies of both the video and audio recordings. I don't know that you can make a representation for the Brookline Cable News.
Yeah, you have to talk to them, I would assume, about that.
Well, so I don't know that we should be video recording until we can clarify that. So do you want to contact them and find out?
Well, I mean, I guess the way they're handling it here, which I assume is what they do in other situations, I don't think it's I would assume it's not the first time, is that they just ask that the camera be set up and then they just take the video from the event and put it together as they see fit.
Again, but I would
So-
like to get clarification as to whether or not we can receive a copy of that.
Okay, before
video
we
recording.
disseminate that, we'll get clarification before.
Yeah, or do you want to speak with before they disseminate, do you want to speak with the,
Yeah,
Public
why
access
don't we
channel?
pause the audio, the video camera until we get clarity on that?
Well, they're busy right now, so we would record it and then we wouldn't disseminate it and you get clarity.
yeah, and it's not even up to us to, I mean, we're not
Right.
doing anything with it, they just set their
Yes, but
camera.
They've sent
in
the
lieu of-
camera.
I guess their
they've put it
photographer
in your
budget is not
custody,
what it once
right?
was.
And so I would just like to get clarity on that before we proceed with video recording this.
So
I
you
mean,
can
do you want us
call
to hold off while you get in touch with them? I mean, that's.
Well, do you have contact information for them?
I don't, but I'm sure we can find it. I mean, if you wanna speak with them, I don't have a problem with that. All I can tell you is they didn't send a photographer, they just sent their camera, just said, set this up and then give us the video and we'll deal with it.
Okay, well, we can talk about this after.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it would have been helpful for the proceedings to be informed of this ahead of time, just so we could have worked out these details. But, I mean, I'm not sure. I guess I'm going to say that I agree that I think everyone should have access to the, to the video. As to the reporter, I mean, it's a little less clear as to whether, you should have access. I mean, generally the rule for a public meeting, and query whether this is a public meeting, is that, it can be recorded as long as it doesn't interfere with the hearing. That's the open meeting generally. But I don't think that it seems like we don't have time to work this out now. And so I'd like to just proceed, if we could, with the understanding that all parties will cooperate in trying to get everyone, either side, the tape. That's fair? Okay, thanks. Okay, so are you okay with that, Wendy? Is that?
Yeah, as long as we get the contact information for the cable news at the end of the proceedings, and then we can contact them to get a copy of that. And
Okay.
they'll let us know about getting a copy of the audio as well.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, anyways, I'm going to hand around a sign-in sheet for the parties. The public doesn't have to sign in, but just the parties, just for the record, if you could pass it around. Okay, and okay, I understand that Ms. Hall has exercised her right to a public hearing. However, there is no need for members of the public to sign in. I respectfully ask that members of the public remain silent for the duration of the hearing. Before we begin, I'd like to lay out the ground rules for the hearing. Counsel for each party will provide a verbal presentation of their case, starting with the employer first, since this is a case involving discipline. While there will be no sworn testimony today and no cross-examination, counsel, you can present your evidence to your witnesses that are here. They're of course welcome to speak. As part of your presentation, please submit any and all relevant information or evidence that you would like me to review and consider as part of the record when making my determination. At the conclusion of the presentations, each party will be given an opportunity to make a rebuttal statement. Should you have questions for the opposing side, I ask that you address those questions to me first. And if I determine the question is relevant, I'll direct the opposing side to answer. Please note that I may have questions myself during the hearing to ensure that I fully understand the facts presented by both the parties. At the conclusion of the hearing, I will close the record to new information so that I can begin my deliberation, considering the evidence and preparing my decision. I am required by law to issue my decision within 7 business days, which means that it is due no later than Thursday, October 3rd. So we have this room for 2 hours, which I believe will be plenty of time to hopefully hear all the facts in this matter. What I'm going to try and do is just let all the information come in. But if I feel like we're getting way off topic, we're going to run out of time, then I'll do what I have to do to try and move things along. If everyone could just turn off their cell phone notifications, just so we don't have any interruptions during it, that'd be great. So without any further ado, if I could ask the employer here to begin your presentation. Thank you. Attorney Chu.
Before I start, I have put together some exhibits that I will be walking you through this morning. And I will be referencing these exhibits throughout the presentation. So this morning's hearing concerns a 5-day suspension that was issued by Chief Lipson to Patrol Officer Amy Hall due to her actions on September 5th, 2019. Before I get into the specifics of that suspension, I do want to give you some background information to give you some context about the events that occurred on September 5th. Officer Hall is a patrol officer with the 1st Platoon. She's scheduled to work from 7:20 a.m. until 3:30 p.m. Earlier this year, Officer Hall did file a charge of discrimination and retaliation with the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, the MCAD, and she has retained private counsel to represent her in the MCAD matter. And that case is currently pending before the MCAD, and there is an investigative conference scheduled in late October. Separately, on October 13th, Officer Hall reported finding a page from the collective bargaining agreement between the town of Brookline and the police officers union in her departmental mailbox. She claimed that the document had been left in her mailbox in an effort to harass and intimidate her, and at her request, the department did conduct an investigation but was unable to determine the identity of the person or persons who left that document in her mailbox. The department notified Officer Hall of the results of this investigation on Friday, August 30th. Following that, Officer Hall spoke to Lieutenant Kevin Mealy on at least 4 separate occasions about getting a copy of that departmental investigation report. So this brings us to September 5th and the incident for which she received the 5-day suspension. On that particular morning, she had been assigned to work to patrol Sector 5 in the 545 car. She left the station after roll call, but called into dispatch at approximately 8:35 a.m. asking to return to the station. While she was in the station, she received a call from dispatch directing her to assist a Brookline resident who was at the front desk of the police station looking to file a police report of suspicious activity. Officer Hall acknowledged the call, meaning that she was going to service it, but she never actually responded to service the resident at the front desk. And after waiting more than 30 minutes for Officer Hall to appear, the resident left the building without being able to file her police report. Later that same shift, Officer Hall was directed by the shift supervisor to file a written report on why she did not service the call after acknowledging it, and the report that she submitted was filled with untruthful statements. It turns out that Officer Hall was actually conducting personal business, specifically making a public records request for that investigation report that I mentioned earlier, during the time period that the resident was waiting for Officer Hall to come down and take her report. So if you take a look at Employer Exhibit 1 in the binder, this is the notice of suspension that was provided to Officer Hall. So the first page is the cover notice, and then the actual personnel order that follows includes a written statement of the specific reasons for the suspension. And if you flip to the second page of that personnel order, you will find the specific rule violations that Officer Hall was found to have committed. So specifically, she was found to be in violation of Brookline Police Department rules and regulations governing truthfulness, neglect of duty, and personal business while on duty. And based on these violations, she was issued the 5-day suspension. I've also provided for you behind tab 2, excerpts from the Brookline Police Department's rules and regulations manual. There's 2 sections to this exhibit. The first part discusses required conduct for police officers, and it clearly states paragraph 2, truthfulness. Untruthfulness will not be tolerated by the department. And then it also says that all members of this department, both sworn and civilian, shall truthfully state the facts in all reports, as well as when he or she appears before any judicial, departmental, or other official investigation, hearing, trial, or proceeding. That's
Okay.
there.
Yep.
Employees who are found to be untruthful in any report to the department shall be subject to serious discipline up to and including termination consistent with just cause principles. That's all laid out in this document. If you flip to the second part of the exhibit, this discusses prohibited conduct. This is again from the Brookline Police Department Rules and Regulations Manual. And you will see that paragraph 3 addresses,
Sorry,
Sorry.
tab 3? Or?
same exhibit, tab 2.
Tab 2, okay.
It's after the blue page.
If you flip after the blue page, this is
Confused by
the
the blue
section
page.
that addresses prohibited conduct. Paragraph 3 discusses neglect of duty, which is defined as being absent from assigned duty without leave or failing to take suitable and appropriate police action when any crime, public disorder, or other incident requires police attention. And then you will also find personal business under
It's 12.
yes, sorry. Paragraph 12, conducting personal business on duty. That's prohibited conduct under the manual. I'm also including for your review, as employer exhibit 3, a job description for the patrol officer position. And this again is also part of the department's rules and regulations manual, and we have highlighted relevant portions of the job description for your reference. But in a nutshell, patrol officers, including Officer Hall, are required to respond punctually and efficiently to any calls for service. And then if you flip to employer exhibit 4, this is Officer Hall's acknowledgement of receipt of the department's rules and regulations manual that she signed on October 18th, 2009. So there should be no question that Officer Hall knew or should have known what was required and expected of her and what constituted prohibited conduct on September 5th, 2019. Now getting back to Officer Hall's actions on that date, as I previously stated, at approximately 8:35 a.m., Officer Hall did call into dispatch asking to return to the station. She gave no indication of why she was looking to return to the station, only that she was asking for a return. And upon returning to the station, Officer Hall approached Lieutenant Mealy to once again inquire about getting a copy of the investigation report regarding that document that had been placed in her mailbox. And as I stated before, this was not the first time that she had engaged in a discussion with Lieutenant Mealy about this document. And as he did on each of the prior occasions that they spoke, Lieutenant Mealy informed Officer Hall that if she wanted a copy of the report, she or her attorney could file a public records request through the department's records division. Officer Hall left Lieutenant Mealy's office shortly before 9 a.m. And just to give you some context, some further context, if you look at Employer Exhibit 5, this is actually an email that Lieutenant Mealy had sent to Officer Hall the day before, indicating that she should go to the Public Records Division, make a request for a public record through the Records Division. So this is just an example of one of the earlier communications that they had regarding public records requests. At approximately 8:52 a.m. on September 5th, the officer who was assigned to the front desk of the police station called dispatch asking that an officer be sent to the front desk in order to take a report from a resident about suspicious activity. Dispatch called Officer Hall to take that report at 9:09 a.m., and Officer Hall acknowledged that she would. At approximately 9:40 a.m., 31 minutes later, the officer at the front desk called dispatch again to report that the resident had to leave the station and also to confirm that Officer Hall never appeared to take that resident's report. A few seconds after that, dispatch informed Officer Hall to disregard the call because the resident had left the station. Now, I have provided you copies of all of these calls, including Officer Hall's call to return to the station at 8:35 a.m. And this is Exhibit 6.
Okay, and it's a audio recording?
Yes,
Yeah.
they're audio recordings. I would actually like to play them for you so you can hear them. However, I do believe that at least one of them contains the name of the resident who appeared. And so I'm not sure that we want that on the recordings.
I've heard the calls, I didn't
It doesn't
remember
have the
hearing
resident's name.
I can't remember.
It doesn't, I know it
I mean, we
doesn't.
could listen to it in private caucus briefly if you want to be sure. But I just, when you said that, I was thinking I didn't hear a name, but we can check it out if you're concerned. I don't mind doing that.
But I would like for you to hear the call.
Sure, I mean, did it go over dispatch, is it could the public have all heard it to begin
Yes.
with? So I don't know, does it prejudice?
Not the public, it's the department would refer to the radio.
But public people can have access to our scanners, so they could hear it.
I can't remember if her name was on
And her name was not on it.
I don't know
It just
what
gives
the
a
radio-
street, says
it
Brinton
may have been
Road.
on the- May have been on the phone with the phone call, and that would notify them.
Okay, how long is the recording?
They're very short, there's 5 of them.
Okay,
5 audio recordings.
I'm just wondering if we just listen to them to make sure and then go ahead and put it on the record, or?
We can do that.
Her name was not on it.
Okay.
They dispatched.
Yeah, we could just, it's only gonna take a minute to listen to it quickly and make sure, and that's fine, but I
The call
guess.
to you, I'm talking about the call that Officer Elwood at the front desk made to dispatch. I think
I
that.
have no idea.
Okay.
maybe he can check her.
So, I guess what I'm gonna, maybe we just turn off the camera for a moment to listen to this, and then we'll go back on and we'll play it if there's no problem, or if we decide that, I guess there's a resident who should be protected for some reason, then we'll only play that. Okay, so we just went off the record to review the tapes of some telephone calls, and we thought that there might be some matters that were protected from public disclosure. So I think we've listened to them, I think we've determined that one may, and so I think that was a call from, I guess, identifying a particular citizen who wanted to report something to the police. So we're 5 calls in total. I think what we're going to do just quickly is we'll play the 4 calls other than that one call that we think might raise an issue.
So if you turn to the index of this exhibit document
Sure.
binder, it does
Number
have the
6?
specific, the index.
Okay.
It does have the specific times that each of these calls were made.
Okay, that's
So
helpful.
the first call is made at 8:35 a.m. and 32 seconds, and this is Officer Hall calling in for a return.
Five four five essential. 545. Can I get a return? Roger.
And as I stated before, Officer Hall was in car 545. That is her identification on the call. I will not play that second call, second audio file, sorry, but it was a call from from the front desk to dispatch made at 8:52 a.m. and 55 seconds, and this is regarding the resident who wants to file the police report. This third audio file occurred at 9:09 and 50 seconds a.m., and this is dispatch contacting Officer Hall, assigning her to take that report.
Control 2545. 5. Before you clear the station, could you be a part of the lobby for a report out of Brinton Road? Roger.
So when Officer Hall says Roger, she is acknowledging that she will be servicing that call. This fourth audio file was at 9:40 and 27 seconds a.m. and this is the front desk contacting dispatch to let them know that the resident had to leave the station.
Hi, that woman from Brickton Road had to leave.
Okay.
Okay?
Did the front car not show up?
No.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
So the male voice in that recording is someone, an officer at the front desk, is that?
Correct. And then this is the last call, which was made at 9:40 and 56 seconds a.m. and this is dispatch telling Officer Hall to disregard the call.
Control 545. You can disregard the call at the front desk, they got to leave.
So as you can see from these audio files, approximately 31 minutes elapsed between the time that Officer Hall received the call from dispatch, acknowledged the call, and then when the resident left without being serviced. There should be no question that Officer Hall's actions on that morning of September 5th constituted neglect of duty in violation of the department's policy. She received an order from dispatch, which she acknowledged, to take a police report from a resident in the town. The resident waited for approximately 30 minutes before finally having to leave the station, and during this time, Officer Hall never bothered to even make a courtesy call to say that she was delayed or to indicate when she would be arriving. And as a result of Officer Hall's neglect, this resident was not able to file her report of suspicious activity. When the shift supervisor learned that Officer Hall had failed to respond to the call for service, he directed her to submit a written report to him explaining her neglect of duty. Specifically, he directed her to submit a written report explaining 1, why she did not assist the citizen at the front desk, 2, where she was when dispatch called her to service the call, and 3, what she was doing that prevented her from servicing that call. The shift sergeant informed Officer Hall of his request both in in an email and then also in person. And I actually have the written request from the shift supervisor as Employer Exhibit 7. In response to this order, Officer Hall submitted a written report, which is Employer Exhibit 8. This report includes numerous untrue statements, which I'd like to go over with you in the document. So if you take a look at paragraph 1, she writes in her report, I was on an authorized return to the station in order to speak to Lieutenant Mealy. During this time, Lieutenant Mealy gave me certain instructions. Lieutenant Mealy gave me an assignment to complete. This is absolutely false. Officer Hall returned to the station of her own accord. She was not ordered back to the station by Lieutenant Mealy or anyone else. She came back to the station so she could have yet another conversation with Lieutenant Mealy about her personal desire to get a copy of the department's investigation report. Lieutenant Mealy never directed her to get a copy of the report, nor did any other supervisor. Lieutenant Mealy simply referred her to the Records Division to make a public records request. This can in no way be considered a superior officer issuing an assignment to a subordinate officer. Lieutenant Mealy was not giving Officer Hall an order, he was merely informing her how to obtain a copy of a document that she wanted to get from the department. Lieutenant Mealy's statements to Officer Hall on that morning of September 5th is no more of an order than the email that he had sent to her the previous day. And it's worth noting that Officer Hall has never claimed that the September 4th email was an order from Lieutenant Mealy. What's more, Lieutenant Mealy was not even aware that Officer Hall went to the Records Division after leaving his office. He was only aware that she left his office shortly before 9 a.m. Also in paragraph 1, she makes the statement, Lieutenant Mealy and Sergeant Ferris knew I was in the station and would respond when I was clear. If at any time Lieutenant Mealy or Sergeant Ferris wanted me to end my assignment and immediately respond, then they would have said so. Again, Officer Hall was not working on another assignment at the time that she acknowledged the call from dispatch. Neither Lieutenant Mealy nor Sergeant Ferris had given her assignment when she returned to the station. The only assignment that she had been given on that particular morning was the one from dispatch, directing her to report to the front desk to take a report from a resident. But even if she had been on another assignment, the department's policy is that officers respond to calls from dispatch unless a supervisor overrides it. Not that you only respond if a supervisor tells you to. If you go back to the Employer Exhibit 2, which talks about prohibited conduct, you will see that paragraph 25 discusses orders from dispatch. This is the second of the two documents behind the blue tab. Behind the blue page.
Yeah.
Paragraph 25 talks about orders from dispatch. And it states, all personnel shall promptly answer and execute all orders from the dispatcher. These orders shall be considered as direct orders from higher authority. So not only was Officer Hall untruthful when she made this claim that she was working on another assignment, she also misstated the department's policy on responding to calls from dispatch. So going back to Officer Hall's written statement, which is Employer Exhibit 8, if you look at paragraph 2, she writes, Sergeant Ferris refuses to tell me who asked for this report. Instead, he handed me a computer-written statement that was obviously not written by him. I am only to assume, because of his refusal to tell me who ordered this report, that it was neither from him nor from Lieutenant Mealy who authorized my assignment in the station. Again, Officer Hall continues to misrepresent that she received an assignment from Lieutenant Mealy while in the station. In addition, her statements describing the meeting where Sergeant Ferris directed her to submit a report are equally untrue. The discussion between Sergeant Ferris and Officer Hall was very brief. He told her to submit a written report addressing 1, why she didn't assist the citizen at the front desk, 2, where she was when dispatch called her, and 3, what she was doing that she could not service the call. She began answering his questions verbally, and Sergeant Ferris stopped her and told her to put it into her written report. Officer Hall said that she would, and then she left the office. That was the extent of their discussion. At no time did Officer Hall ask Sergeant Ferris who was requiring her to submit the report, and at no time did Sergeant Ferris refuse to inform her who had made that request. In addition, this computer-written statement, which we infer to be Employer Exhibit 7, was in fact written by Sergeant Ferris, and it's unclear why Officer Hall jumped to any conclusions regarding the author of that document. In paragraph 3 of her written statement, written report, Officer Hall writes, Lieutenant Mealy was well aware that I was in the station, and if he wanted me to clear this assignment, he would have done so. It is common policy that if an officer is in the station on an assignment not canceled by a supervisor, those other officers on the street would take a non-emergency call. This, however, is not the case with me. I still responded I would take the call and clearly dispatched. Lieutenant Mealy and Sergeant Ferris knew I was in the station on an assignment. Again, throughout this report, Officer Hall repeatedly perpetuates this false claim that she was given an assignment by Lieutenant Mealy. In addition, she repeatedly misstates the department's policy with regards to servicing the calls, and she does that in this paragraph of the report as well. I would also reiterate that Lieutenant Mealy was not aware of where Officer Hall went after leaving his office, and her assertion that Lieutenant Mealy and Sergeant Ferris knew that she was in the station on an assignment is completely false. So I have provided you with reports that have been prepared by Lieutenant Mealy and Sergeant Ferris in connection with the statements that are in Officer Hall's reports, and these are Employer Exhibits 9 and 10. You can review these in greater detail on your own time, but essentially I have outlined to you in my presentation already the information in these two reports that contradict the statements in Officer Hall's report.
Okay, and so these reports, I guess, Lieutenant Campbell, you requested them of the, is that, I know that they're dated the 6th.
I did not request them, but I was CC'd.
Okay, so
These are reports that the officers felt that they wanted to prepare in response to Officer
Okay.
Hall's
Okay.
inaccurate statements in her
Sure.
report.
Yep.
So going back to Officer Hall's written report, there's a point that she makes in paragraph 4 that I would like to address. Take a look at paragraph 4. She states, also, just last week, a male officer was called for 15 minutes on the radio, but had all patrol and detective division looking for him. No reports, no investigation took place, but instead, the incident was trivialized the next morning by 3 supervisors, Lieutenant Neely, Sergeant Hill, and Sergeant Desario, by making jokes about how this officer was asleep or should listen to his radio in front of the entire 1st platoon roll call that I was present for. Presumably, she references this incident as a situation that she thought was comparable to her own, and that maybe this is disparate treatment or something like that. Not sure. That's just a guess, but I would like to address that because she has included this particular incident in her statement. So the incident to which Officer Hall alludes is actually not comparable at all to her situation, the situation for which she was disciplined. I would also add that contrary to her assertions, that matter was investigated by the department, and the issue was determined to be equipment failure. Officer Hall likely was not aware of this because she's not a supervisory officer, so there's no reason for her to have that information. However, since she's referenced it, we do wish to clarify for the record what happened in that situation. On August 27th, 2019, there was an officer, Officer Amendola, who received a call from dispatch to respond to a alarm call in his sector, and that call was made at approximately 12:25 p.m. and Officer Amendola did not respond to that call. And after that first call, dispatch made several additional calls to Officer Amendola over the radio, and he did not respond to any of those radio calls. Finally, at approximately 12:34 p.m., which would have been approximately 9 minutes after that initial call, another officer reported seeing his cruiser at the DPW, Department of Public Works yard. Sergeant David Hill actually went to the DPW yard, and he spoke with Officer Amendola to determine why he did not respond to the radio calls from dispatch, and Sergeant Hill was able to confirm that Officer Amendola happened to be in a part of town where there is no signal allowing for the transmission of calls. So even though Officer Amendola had on him his portable radio and his personal cell phone, he actually did not hear any of those calls from dispatch, or any of the calls that were made to his cell phone on that day. Since Officer Amendola did not respond to the radio calls due to a failure of the radio system, which was beyond his control, no disciplinary action was taken in that situation. In addition, no officers filed any written reports in connection with that incident. However, I have provided to you an affidavit from Sergeant Hill regarding his investigation into that matter, and that is Employer Exhibit 11. I would also like to note for you that since this incident occurred, the department has advised the IT department of the issue. And now I think there's steps being taken to figure out what can be done about the lack of reception in parts of the town. Officer Hall also alluded in her report that the department did raise this at a subsequent, as she alluded in her report, the department did raise this as an issue at a subsequent roll call with patrol officers because this is an important thing for officers to be aware of, the fact that there are potential dead zones in the town that affect an officer's ability to receive and or transmit a radio call. However, her mischaracterization, she has grossly mischaracterized the supervisor's use of humor in bringing that to officers' attention as trivializing the matter. The department has not tried to trivialize that matter at all. Just to be clear, the situation involving Officer Amendola is completely different from the situation involving Officer Hall. Officer Amendola did not hear the calls from dispatch because he happened to be in a part of town where there was no radio reception. In contrast, Officer Hall, there's no question that she heard the call from dispatch, that she acknowledged it, and that she then proceeded to disregard that call so she could pursue her own personal agenda. Now, in addition to all of the statements, false statements that I've already discussed with you, she also makes a number of incorrect assumptions and conclusions regarding her NCAE case, which I don't think we need to address here today. Suffice to say, the department's position is she's completely wrong and her conclusions are completely unfounded. Lastly, there's the matter of Officer Hall conducting personal business while on duty instead of responding to that resident call. As I've stated several times during this hearing, Officer Hall was not performing work-related duties while at the police station on the morning of September 5th. Her discussion with Lieutenant Mealy related to her own personal desire to obtain a copy of an investigation report that the department had of a copy of an investigation report that the department had conducted in response to her claims that, this page from the CBA had been placed in her mailbox in an effort to harass and intimidate her. It's obvious that she wanted a copy of that investigation report to further her NCAE case against the department. There was no work-related need for her to have a copy of that investigation report. It is not clear why Officer Hall chose the morning of September 5th to finally make that public records request, because she hadn't heeded Lieutenant Mealy's advice on any of the previous days. Nonetheless, we know that is exactly what she was doing while the Brookline resident waited at the front desk for Officer Hall for over 30 minutes to come and take her police report. Officer Hall left Lieutenant Mealy's office shortly before 9 a.m. and at 9:17 a.m., after she had acknowledged the call from dispatch and while the resident was still waiting in the station, Officer Hall sent an email to the Records Division Supervisor requesting a copy of the investigation report, and a copy of that email is Employer Exhibit 12. And it shows the date and time that she sent this request for a public record at 9:17 a.m. on September 5th. And if you take a look at the actual email text itself, there is a reference in this email to an earlier conversation that she had with the records supervisor. So we can infer that sometime between leaving Lieutenant Mealy's office at 9 a.m. and 9:17 a.m. when she sent this email, she was in the records division discussing her desire to obtain a copy of that investigation report. The call from dispatch would have fallen squarely within that window of time. And even after she sent this email at 9:17 a.m., we know that she continued to ignore the resident who was waiting for her at the front desk because she never bothered to show up until after the resident left the station at 9:40 a.m. Based on all of this evidence presented, it should be clear that Officer Hall failed to perform her job duties on the morning of September 5th, 2019, and that she was engaging in personal business on work time when she should have been performing police work, and that she made several untruthful statements in an official report. In terms of progressive discipline, Officer Hall has received prior disciplines for similar rule violations. Specifically, in April of this year, she received a 15-day suspension as part of a negotiated settlement agreement between Officer Hall, the union, and the department after she repeatedly refused a supervisor's direct order. She failed to cooperate in a departmental investigation, and she inappropriately accessed and removed a police report without authorization. Then in July of this year, she received a written reprimand for failing to follow the proper chain of command and for disobeying a superior officer's direct order, requiring her to follow the proper chain of command. She's also been spoken to on multiple occasions where discipline has not been issued about what the department and her supervisor expect from her. However, it is clear from her conduct that Officer Hall does not believe that the department's rules and regulations apply to her. Accordingly, we ask that the 5-day suspension be upheld in order to send a strong message that she is not above the rules and that she must follow the same rules and regulations as every other sworn officer of the department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Counselor, it's
Thank you.
your turn.
If it's okay with you, I'd like you to hear from Officer Hall directly. So, as much as I'd love to just sit here and tell you what happened, I'd like you to hear from her directly about what happened and how things really have gone. Just to give you an overview, our position here is that Officer Hall is being completely railroaded in terms of this discipline. This discipline, by the way, was handed down September 12th, which was, I think, a day or two after we notified the department that we were amending her MCD charge to name the chief and other people individually. And this notice came within a couple days of that, a full week after this supposed incident happened. So we think the timing on that is fishy, to say the least. Luckily, you don't have to decide whether or not discrimination's happening. That's the MCAD's job. But the issue before you is whether or not there's just cause to uphold this discipline. And there really is no just cause here, for two reasons that you'll hear about. The first reason is that, simply put, the chief's conclusions that led him to allegedly give the discipline are just not factually accurate. Officer Hall did not in any way disregard dispatch and failed to meet the citizen. She actually complied with dispatch's order. Dispatch said before you clear the station, i.e. before you leave the station, when your return call is done, stop by the front desk. She didn't leave the station without stopping by the front desk. So the entire premise of the discipline is completely inaccurate. So there's no just cause on that count. The second reason that the department can't prove there's just cause is because this idea that Officer Hall merits this discipline for missing a call is completely arbitrary. There are 2 missed calls within the last approximately month that other officers have been involved with. You heard about one of them, there are actually 2 that have happened recently. Officers just ignoring the calls, by the way, not even responding to them. And not only is no discipline issued, there's no investigation by the department, no one has to write any reports about it. As you heard actually from Mrs. Chu, that was joking about it. So, if this is an infraction that really merits suspending someone for a full week, shouldn't that happen to everyone? And that hasn't happened here. And that's only in the last about a month. I'm sure there are other situations that are out there as well. So, this is a case where the discipline isn't founded. There's certainly different treatment between Officer Hall and other officers in terms of enforcing these rules. And just so you know, and Officer Hall is going to talk some about this, when Officer Hall agreed to what Ms. Chu described as a settlement for another suspension, which was done on the threat of being terminated, which, as I said, you'll hear about, that included 2 more weeks of suspension that the department is now going to levy on her. So it's not really just a 5-day suspension, as bad as that is, but it's a 3-week suspension, which the department hasn't even offered to break up. And that means that Officer Hall and her family, she's the main breadwinner in her family, as they know, she has 3 small children, is going to go about a month without any pay. So the issue here isn't just a 5-week suspension, and is that fair for supposedly missing this call? It's the ramifications are much more serious. So with that said, I did just want to raise this. I know we've gone back and forth about it, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But just reviewing the rules and the procedures on disciplinary hearings, my understanding is that, as it says, under the process for police department discipline and selectmen's review, it talks about all matters involving chief's recommendations for discharge, removal, suspension for a period of more than 5 days, falling under these rules, and the rules require or allow for cross-examination of witnesses and subpoenaing people to come and documents, which I think would have helped us here. I understand your position on it. Again, I'm not looking to belabor that point, but I did want to raise it because I respectfully think that was required and would have helped us. As you can hear, there are a number of parties involved. People are giving different versions of events. I think it would have helped you to hear directly from Lieutenant Meanley, who's not here today, Sergeant Ferris, who I understand is available but isn't here for some reason. And you will hear, unfortunately, from Officer Hall. But I think it would have helped to hear from these other individuals. So with that being said, I know Officer Hall wanted to give you just a brief brief introductory statement, and then we can get into the heart of the matter.
So I just want to say, my name's Amy Hall, and I asked for this open hearing to show everyone that I've been discriminated and retaliated against by a predominantly male department. And they'll do nothing short to terminate me. I've been working as a police officer for 19 years. My mother, my father, my uncles, my brother, over 200 years of service to this department. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity for me to speak and tell my story.
Alright, so if it makes sense, I'll just kind of lead through questioning to
Sure.
introduce the information,
Sure,
if
that's
that's
fine,
the, if
yeah.
that's the easiest. So Officer Hall, you mentioned you have over 19 years on the force. When was the first time you received any formal discipline as a member of the Brookline Police Department?
April of 2019.
And you, are you married?
Yes, I am.
Do you have children?
I do.
And how many children do you
I
have?
have 3 small children,
Okay, how old are they?
6, 5, and 2.
Are you the primary breadwinner in your family?
I am. My husband was on this job and he got disabled being on this job.
So if this suspension is upheld and 3 weeks are levied on you, what impact would that have on your family?
A huge impact.
So let's just go through, if we could. And actually, you've heard about sort of the timeline of the MCD complaint from Attorney Chu. So I mean, if you're good with that, I don't need to repeat any of that.
Yeah.
You can sort of skip ahead.
Sure.
Fair to say your MCD complaint was filed in around May of this
May,
year.
yes.
And you received the notice from the chief, and this is, I'm just turning to Employers Exhibit number 1, on September 12th, 2019.
Correct.
And was that around the time that we started the process to name the chief and some other individuals in your MCD?
Yes,
This notice came just after that, correct?
correct.
Okay. And there's been
Which
some.
notice again, this is the, exhibit
Number
2?
1, exhibit number 1.
Okay.
Yeah, the discipline notice. And as Attorney Chu said, on September 5th, you were in the station on a return call.
Yes.
If you could just let us know, what's a return call?
So a return call happens daily. Anyone can ask for a return, either to use the facility, to talk to a lieutenant, to talk to a sergeant, to check your email, to check personal emails. It's you're on a return. And it pretty much lets dispatch know, dispatch grants it, so them up to everyone in the chain of command, including the chief, knows that you're in the building on a return, and nobody's not granting you not to come in. And so if you have a call in your sector, it's either A, you're going to be delayed because you're coming from the station, or B, you're not able to take it, so they send 2 other sectors to service a call.
So when your return call was granted, you came back into the station. What was your reason for coming back into the station?
My reason for coming back into the station is like Attorney Chu said. In August, I got a letter in my mailbox highlighted, and I went to my sergeant and my lieutenant, Sergeant Desario and Lieutenant Mealy. I asked them if they put this in my mailbox. They said, of course not, we would not have done that. I said, this is intimidating, this is harassing, and I don't feel safe working here because someone is trying to intimidate me. And they both concurred that this was unacceptable. And that's when I said I would like an investigation done. They agreed, and Lieutenant Mealy said he would notify Lieutenant Campbell. Then a few hours later, I came back in to ask if he was able to notify Lieutenant Campbell. He said he did. And then I said, okay, I'm going to email Lieutenant Campbell, and I was ordered that I'm not allowed to speak to Lieutenant Campbell, have any direct conversation with him or any interaction with him. And so I had to go through Lieutenant Mealy. That was allegedly what Lieutenant Campbell said to Lieutenant Mealy, because that's what Lieutenant Mealy told me. So that's why every day I would have communication with Lieutenant Mealy asking questions, and I have emails that Lieutenant Mealy asked me to write about questions. Who do I think did this? Why would I want, just numerous questions. Why would I want the video at the front desk? Because that's the only video surveillance that we have that's inside the building to see if someone retrieved a pink highlighter and had the piece of paper in their hand. I had to ask all these, and I had to go through my sergeant and my lieutenant to give it to Lieutenant Campbell. And that's never done before in my 19-year career, where you go through loopholes to get to the internal affairs officer. And so Lieutenant Mealy again told me I was not allowed to speak to Lieutenant Campbell. Then on Friday at 3:15, approximately 3:15, I was ordered in to see Lieutenant Mealy. He had a letter from the chief, and it just said that they had no findings, and if I could think of anything, to send an email in the proper chain of command. No one ever interviewed me when I'm the victim about this. Nobody asked me any questions. And so then I said to Lieutenant Mealy, I would like the investigation report.
What was the date? You said it was Friday?
Maybe September 30th. I don't know. Do you have it?
This is
That Friday?
August?
August
Okay.
30th. I don't have it in my, I can
It
get
was
it.
about a week before this.
It was 2 weeks after the investigation, when I kept on asking Lieutenant Mealy what's going on, what's the status.
When was the letter was put in your box?
It was put in my box, I want to say either August 12th or August 13th.
Okay.
I don't have the time frame right in front of me.
Okay.
But it was 2 weeks later, I get an email or a report from the chief that gave to Lieutenant Mealy. Then I asked Lieutenant Mealy, can I get the investigation? And he said he would have to, I could not speak to Lieutenant Campbell again, he would have to. So that's why I went through Lieutenant Mealy on a daily basis. And no, I did not email him all the time. I went to him and to my sergeant, and that's why it's not all documented.
Officer, can I just interrupt? So was there a report that existed, but you just weren't?
He said it
saying
was a report that existed, but I didn't get it. Until this day right now, I still do not have that report. And neither does my attorney, who requested it for today to show that it's not personal business. And so every day I'd ask Lieutenant Mealy what's the status, and then on September 4th he told me he was going to speak to Lieutenant Campbell because there was some form that I had to fill out. So on September 5th I had a traffic post. Then after my traffic post, that's when I requested to be on a return to ask Lieutenant Mealy. He instructed me, I sent you an email about it. I said, okay, I'm going to go look at it. He said, okay. That's how he authorized me to go do this. And I brought it back to him, and that's when I inquired him, why do I have to go see records? It's not a public matter. It's an internal investigation. And he said that's what Lieutenant Campbell told him to do, for me to do. So I proceeded to go speak to Neil Harrington.
So if I can just, so the email that Attorney Chu had pointed out, it's a
Correct.
September 4th
Yep,
email, that's Exhibit 5, you saw that on the 5th.
correct. Lieutenant Mealy said, I sent that to you. And so then I said to him, okay, I'm going to go check my email. Then I went back into his office. And I talked to him about, what is this form? He said, I have no idea. Go see Neil Harrington. I said, do I have your authorization to see him? Because that's what I have to do. I'm the only one in this department that has to ask for authorization to speak to everybody else. So he said, of course, you can go see Neil Harrington. So I went to Neil. Neil said there was no form, just send an email to me. As I'm sending the email, that's when dispatch said, before you leave the station, there's someone at the front desk. And I acknowledged. When I sent that email, that's when I proceeded to the front desk. And as I was proceeding, that's when dispatch said to me, you can clear. As I proceeded to the front desk, I asked Officer Elwood, where is she? And he said, she left. And I said, what was it about? And he said, she's crazy or nuts. I can't remember the exact words that he used, but he said she's crazy or nuts. She thinks someone's coming into her apartment using her computer and her jewelry, even though her computer's still in her house and the jewelry is there. Nothing is missing. And then I said, did she leave any information? Maybe she wants me to contact her. He said, no, don't worry about it. She's crazy or nuts, whatever one he used. I know he used one of them. And he downplayed it, said, don't worry about it. So I said, okay. Then I proceeded back into Lieutenant, oh,
Sorry, let me stop you, just so we go step by step here. So the order, we heard the call from dispatch, it said before you clear the station, just what is clearing the station? Does that mean leaving the station to go back on patrol?
Correct.
Okay,
So they knew I was in there doing something.
right, okay. So, and who had you spoken to, you said you spoke to Lieutenant Mealy,
Yes.
by the way, would Lieutenant Mealy have heard the dispatch call that came to you?
Yes.
Okay. And would it,
And
was
same with the first line supervisor, Sergeant Ferris would have heard the call
okay,
too.
so Sergeant Ferris, I know Attorney Chu talked about Sergeant Ferris asking you for a report that afternoon,
Mhm.
but so he was on duty that
Correct.
morning as
Yep.
well?
He works
Okay.
7:20 to 3:30, just like all of us.
Okay, so he heard the dispatch call. Did Lieutenant Mealy and Sergeant Ferris hear through dispatch that you, that the citizen had left before you spoke with the citizen?
I'm assuming they did, because they're supposed to listen to the radio. You would have to ask them that.
So I just want to ask you about, going back to Exhibit 1. So the second page, we've got, I believe this is Chief Lipson's personnel order. So this contains his findings and the reason for discipline. So it says here, on September 5th, it's just the very beginning, that you received a call from dispatch to report to the front desk at the police station to meet with a citizen there. Is that what the dispatch call had said to you?
No, it did not. It said, before you clear the station, there's someone at the front desk to take a report.
And this says later that same day, Sergeant Tom Ferris learned of the incident. And again, I think that's also in the written statement that was submitted from Sergeant Ferris. Since he learned of the incident. But I think you said a few moments ago that Sergeant Ferris was actually present and listening to the radio that morning.
Correct.
Did the two of you talk about what was prompting his request for your report?
Yes.
Okay, can you just describe that for me? What was your conversation?
So after my traffic post, dispatch told me to be on a return to see the sergeant. I proceeded into the sergeant's office. Sergeant Ferris had his head down and said, it was brought to my attention that you didn't service a call. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, it was brought to my attention that there was a lady at the front desk and she had to leave. And he handed me this piece of paper, and then I said to him, I said, who brought this to your attention? And he said to me, don't worry about it. And then I tried to explain to him, I said, I got an email from Lieutenant Mealy, and I told him about it, and he said, I just need a report, and I need it to be done before 3:30. Then I left, and then I realized I have another traffic post at 2:20, so I went back in to see Sergeant Ferris, and I said, what is your pleasure? I have a traffic post at 2:20. Are you going to have someone cover my post, or do you want me to continue to do the post? And he said, you can do the post, and then that's when I said to him, you wanted this, you ordered me to have this done before 3:30. There's no way that by the time I get back at 3:15, I can't type this up. I handwritten it out. I can't type that fast and have it done by 3:30. I was just giving him a heads up. I said, either A, I'll have to get overtime because it's going to go past my shift, or can you have someone watch to do the traffic post? Then he said, I will authorize to have someone to do the traffic post for you. I said, okay. And then I proceeded and did my report.
So Officer Hall, I just turned to this tab number 8 in the department's documents, and this is the report that you typed up that you just told
Correct,
us
yes.
about? Okay. were you truthful in writing this report?
Yes, I was.
Did anyone follow up with you and ask you, what, when you said Lieutenant Mealy gave me an assignment to complete, did anyone come to you and say, what did you mean by that? Can you
No,
explain what you're doing?
none of this was brought to my attention.
Okay. Do you believe Lieutenant Mealy knew why you were on the return call the morning of September 5th?
Yes, because I had multiple conversations with him, and I CC'd him on everything that I did.
And Attorney Chu talked about your description of how things typically work in the station, and accused you of not being truthful about that as well. So when you say here in the third paragraph, it's common policy that if an officer is in the station on an assignment not canceled by a supervisor, those other officers on the street would take a non-emergency call. Is that a truthful description?
Yes.
Okay, and let me ask you about, because you raised it in your report, you say just last week, and you're writing this September 5th, so it was the week prior to that. A male officer was called for 15 minutes on the radio, had all patrol and detective division looking for him. No reports, no investigation took place, but instead the incident was trivialized the next morning. So we actually have the audio of those calls. Assuming my technology cooperates, if I could play those just for your, so you hear the.
These are some calls in addition to what we've already heard?
They are.
No.
So these are dispatch calls. These are dispatch calls. Sorry, did I say no?
No, he said it's at the same one, but it's not.
Oh no, it's in addition. So these are in addition.
Okay.
So these are calls. So there are two officers who missed calls within this immediate time frame. We've got audio of those calls from dispatch to them, trying to find them. Then hearing over dispatch they missed the call, and then them eventually calling in late and missing the call.
So you got any objection?
I would only object on the basis that I don't think that they are comparable situations, as I've already outlined to you.
Sure.
The one with Officer Amendola, which was an issue of equipment failure, and so he never responded,
Yep.
acknowledged a
No, I
call, so I
understand.
don't think that they are actually comparable.
How long do you think it'll take to play them? Just
Less than 5 minutes.
Okay.
They're very short. They're similar in length to the ones we
Sure.
They're less than a minute, I think, each. So. Let's see if my battery makes it here. We might have the same laptop. You should be careful of that. I'm sure it's giving you trouble. I'm on life support here with this one.
Mine is very old and extraordinarily old.
Yeah, right. Okay, all right. So Officer Hall, maybe it would help for me. I'll just play these calls one by one, and since you know the car numbers and can understand the dispatch call, you can tell us what's going on here. Let me just make sure I play the right ones for us. Volume up here.
Control C 549, 547.
I think actually comes in.
17 Gleno Road, residential alarm, interior glass break in the kitchen. Five 4-9.
Okay, so she said the number 549. Who does that refer to?
Officer Eddie, Woody Amendola, Eddie Amendola.
Okay, so just in brief, what was going on in that dispatch call?
She was sending 2 officers to a residential alarm. In the Sector 9, in his sector.
Including his car?
Correct, in his sector, where he patrols.
Control 2549, Officer Amendola.
Alright, and just for this is the next call, just a few seconds later, calling for Officer Amendola again. That was, and that was about 12:24 on August 27th, 12:24 p.m. August 27th. So this is 12:34. So about 10 minutes later. Let's locate this one.
Control 2549, Officer Amendola, 549.
Had to inspect myself in the 553 at home.
Roger.
555, check Skyline Park. 560, check out a number. Getting shot into the 519 at the pumps, if somebody could confirm that. Firebird, bring your man, your unit. Glen Road was all set,
Roger.
Alright, so Officer Hall, what was happening on that piece of audio?
On that piece of audio, Sergeant Matty McDonald, who was a sergeant in a different division, got a personal phone call from someone saying that the 9 car is up at the highway. And so he radioed that in to everyone to go up there just to confirm, but the officer was not in the car.
And I heard a reference on there to the address being all set. Does that mean that the call has been dealt with?
Yes.
Okay.
So the 7 car went there, made sure that the house was secured and cleared.
And at this point, this is about 10 minutes after the initial call. What had happened in terms of trying to locate Officer Amendola?
They're still trying to locate him. They're calling him, the sergeant asked to use the emergency button on our radios, and they were calling his personal cell phone.
And when they say he was, I thought I heard them say he's at was it the pump?
The highway,
At the
yeah, that's where
highway?
we can get gas and have maintenance for the vehicles.
Okay, so did police officers go there fairly regularly?
Yes, everyone has to get gas there, and then if you have maintenance, that needs to be something done with the car, you can go there, or you can use the facilities there.
Okay. When you've been there, have you ever had an issue using your police radio?
No.
How long have you been using that facility?
For a very long, I've been for 19 years, I'm sure it's 100 years old, that's where my great uncles worked,
Okay.
so it's been around for a long time.
And then one more call, on Officer Amendola. This is a couple of minutes after the last one we heard. I think this is when he finally.
Go ahead.
549, are you okay?
I am okay. What's the involvement?
Yeah, get everyone looking for you. We're answering your radio. What's your location? Okay, all units, the 549 is okay. You can go back to your sectors.
Yeah, 1064 incident, you know.
And the 1064 is the Superintendent Morgan, so he was out looking for him too.
Okay. And as far as you know, did, and by the way, I think we heard from the department just a few minutes ago, that an officer is required to respond to dispatch unless a superior officer overrides it, and that dispatch calls considered direct orders from a superior officer, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. To your knowledge, did Officer Amendola need to write a report when he missed this call?
No.
To your knowledge, was an investigation done after this incident?
No.
And I think we saw there was an affidavit from Sergeant Hill about this incident. And I'll just note for the record that this affidavit, supposedly looking into it, is dated the 20th of September, which is after you appealed your suspension, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and almost a month after the incident actually happened, right?
Correct.
Okay. And has Officer Amendola been disciplined for missing this call?
No.
And on September 16th of this year, was there another incident where an officer missed a call?
Yes.
Was that Officer Elwood?
Yes.
So I just have 3 quick pieces of audio on that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Control to 544. When you have a chance, could you do some parking enforcement on Upland Road, specifically 28 Upland, Silver CRV parks all day?
Okay, I'll over there.
Brookline Village, 5427 Netherlands Road for a dispute.
Right, so there were two parts to that audio. The first was about parking enforcement, which I think is a different officer. The call for Brookline Village, 542, is that Officer Elwood?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Brookline Village.
And did Officer Elwood respond to that call?
As of now, no.
We're going to skip ahead. So that was at, I believe, 10:51 on September 16th. Here's 10:56.
Control, where's the caller?
We're going to have her come out, stand by.
Are those other officers that are on the call?
Yes.
So other officers stepped in and serviced the call?
Yes.
All right, now I'm going to skip ahead to, I believe this is 11, if I can translate these numbers correctly, 11:07. So after the calls, got other officers on it.
542 control.
Control.
With the other units, we spoke to the RP and involved party. There was no physical confrontation observed. It was verbal only. All parties are on their way, and you can show us clear.
Roger.
All right, so it sounds like this is a little under 20 minutes later. Fair to say that call has been cleared by the other officers. Officer Elwood never acknowledged that call. To your knowledge, did Officer Elwood have to write a report after this incident?
No.
Was there an investigation done?
No.
Has he been disciplined?
No.
much longer would you say?
Oh, I may be just about done, I'm just looking
Okay.
at my notes, I may be just about done.
Well, also, when you go to the highway, and if you're gonna be out of the car a long period of time, you have to notify dispatch. And Officer Amendola never did, so that's why they were looking for him for 15 minutes. And where is that dead zone that they so-called said that he couldn't hear, that he was stationary for over 15 minutes there? Because if someone has a heart attack up there, or if the rest of us go up there, we should be aware of it. And nobody educated us, nobody told us, no one said, hey, this is a dead zone, everyone come up, this is where you guys should stay away, we're getting the IT involved, and we're gonna rectify this as soon as possible. And nobody checked anyone's cell phone up there, and the next day, they did joke about it at roll call, saying, you know, maybe if you stay awake, or if you didn't hit the snooze button on your personal cell phone, you would have heard it, and Sergeant Hill laughed and said, ha, no comment in my presence.
It's always,
All set? Okay, so I'm gonna give, I guess both of you guys could both, you know, take about no more than 10 minutes, that would be great to wrap up. I said this earlier, but we have the room until 2, so. So,
Two or one?
pardon me?
2 or 1?
I'm sorry, 1,
One.
yeah, correct, 1 o'clock.
Yes, very briefly. There are several points that both council and Officer Hall have raised during their presentation that I do want to specifically address. The first point is this idea that the discipline that was handed down to Officer Hall occurred within 1 or 2 days of notifying the town that the MCAD case would be amended. At the time that Chief Lipson issued this disciplinary notice to Officer Hall, he was not aware of the fact that that Officer Hall had filed a motion to amend the MCAD matter. He did not learn about it until approximately, I think, 30 or 40 minutes after having that meeting with Officer Hall. So I just want to clear that up for the record. With regards to this idea that she was on an authorized return to the station to do work-related business, again, you have Lieutenant Neely's report in the record. He very clearly states that this was not an order, he was not giving her an assignment. And typically speaking, Officer Hall is right that there are a number of reasons why an officer might request a return to the station. But typically speaking, if you are conducting personal business, which is what she was doing on that particular morning, and you receive a call from dispatch, and you acknowledge that call, the expectation is that the officer will stop doing the personal business and will immediately service that call. The mission of the Brookline Police Department is to provide efficient, responsive service to the residents of this town, the residents and the citizens of this town. It is not that you are back-burnered until the officer finally decides that they have finished their personal business and are finally ready to get to you, okay? Now, if she was legitimately on a return to the station for business reasons, she should have notified dispatch of that when she received the call from dispatch to go to the front desk. She doesn't say anything, she simply acknowledges the call. So we dispute that contention. With regards to the suspension, there was a point that was made that this was talking about 3-week suspension. I don't think that this is clear to you, and I'm not sure it's really relevant, but in April of this year, Officer Hall did receive a 15-day suspension. That is part of her record for progressive discipline. 10 of those days were offered to be held in abeyance, but she was clearly notified at that time that any further infractions of any further violations of BPD policy would result in her having to serve those 10 days. And so when she continued to violate BPD policies and rules and regulations, she received the 5-day suspension that we're here for, and then she was required to serve those 10 days that had previously been held in abeyance. It is not the department's practice to break up lengthy suspensions, because what is the point of that? I mean, the whole point of a lengthy suspension is so that an officer will learn that the conduct that they've engaged in is inappropriate, and they have to understand the consequences of their actions. So it is not a practice that the department has made with anybody else, and she was not treated any differently in that regard. My understanding is that the Records Division has provided a response to Officer Hall's public records request. I believe there was an email sent to her on September 18th, just last week, was it? With the requested documentation. So I don't know if you had an issue with the communication, but perhaps you should check your email on that. With regards to the this commentary that Officer Elwood at the front desk may or may not have made regarding the citizen that had come in to make this report, if you take umbrage to that, I mean, I don't think that the town or the department's policy is that we only service reports or citizens that come in who are not nuts or crazy. I don't even know whether or not the statements were made allegedly, but regardless, we don't judge the people that come into the station to make police reports, and that shouldn't be, you know, any kind of an excuse or to excuse whatever the delay in her reporting. And I think she does indicate in her statement that after sending the email to the public for the public records request, she immediately came down to the station, and that is to the front desk of the station, and that is patently not true. We know that the email was sent at 9:17 a.m. At 9:40 a.m. the resident left without being serviced, so it is not true at all that she came immediately after sending that email. Again, we dispute the discussion that she had with Sergeant Ferris with regards to filing this report. She presented it as if this was a single conversation with Sergeant Ferris where he asked her for a report, and then she had additional conversations about a traffic post. In actuality, this was two separate discussions that she had with Sergeant Ferris. He brought her in shortly after 1 p.m. to tell her to file this report, to submit this written report. Approximately 1 hour later, he saw her again and followed up with her. Have you done the report? And that was at this point that they discussed the traffic post. And you know, his expectation was that she would submit this written report before the end of her shift, and he told her that shortly after 1 p.m. You know, an hour later, she still had not even bothered to do anything in connection with preparing this report. And it was at that point that Sergeant Ferris did have to make arrangements for another officer to cover the traffic post so that she could actually do the thing that he asked her to do an hour earlier. It may be true that the call from dispatch to Officer Hall went out over the radio, and that officers like Lieutenant Neely and Sergeant Ferris may have heard it, but I'm sure that they were working on other things. We do know that she was not in either of their offices, in either of their presence, when that call from dispatch came out to her at 9:09 a.m. So it's possible that they weren't in tune or highly, you know, attentive to the fact that this call came in, or that, you know, that the call came at 9:40, 31 minutes later, saying that the resident had left the station. Again, they have other responsibilities. It's not like their entire day is focused on monitoring Officer Hall's activities. Again, if Officer Hall thought that she was doing something that was legitimate work-related business in the station when that call came from dispatch, she should have notified dispatch so that another officer could cover that call. That is what a responsible officer would have done. That was not what she did in this circumstance. And just lastly, with regards to the two other incidents that council had raised in connection with Officer Amendola and Officer Elwood, again, I would just say that these were not situations where officers ignored their obligations. In the case of Officer Amendola, he was in a radio dead spot. He happened to be in a part of the DPW facility where there was no reception. This was confirmed by Sergeant Hill when he investigated the matter. He also tested his radio equipment. and had the same trouble communicating with dispatch from that particular location. And this was within the building itself, it was not at the gas pumps, just so you know. And then lastly, with regards to the situation with Officer Elwood, I would just note that that incident took place on September 17th. I don't believe Officer Hall was working at the time, so I am curious how she came upon that information. Regardless, it's the department's position that the call to Officer Elwood is also not comparable. They have played for you select audio files. We provided them with several more that I would like, if you're going to consider this incident, I would like to be able to give you the full audio files because it will show you the timeline. So what happened in the situation of Officer Elwood is that he actually also made a report to come back into the station to work on paperwork. And I think that call came at 10:29 a.m. While he is in the station doing his paperwork, dispatch does call to send him out to this Netherlands Road location for a parking dispute. And what happened was that the dispatcher didn't actually realize that Officer Elwood had not cleared from the station at that juncture, and she had mistakenly assigned him to service backup on that call. And then when she realized her mistake, she immediately sends another car to service backup. It's not as if she called Officer Elwood multiple times and he disregarded the call. She immediately sends another car to service backup, and then that is what you hear is the other officers clearing that call. And then at approximately 10:56 a.m., Officer Elwood clears the station. So he actually clears the station within a few minutes of her sending officers to respond to this call. So I would like to be able to present you with all of the audio files in connection with this so you can understand that this is not a comparable situation. Again, this was not a situation where somebody was engaged in personal business and disregarded a call that he acknowledged. This was a dispatcher who made a mistake by sending out an officer who was on administrative return to the station and then immediately corrected that mistake by sending them another car to service backup.
So before you get into your rebuttal, I just want, maybe we should just, because you just brought it up, the issue of, I mean, basically, I guess ideally I wanted to close the record at the end of the hearing, but I can leave it open until, say, 5 o'clock today, just to, if people feel like there's additional information, that things have come up they couldn't have anticipated that they want to just submit that. I think until 5 o'clock would probably, at the end of the day, that would, or by the end of the day today would be.
Sure. Could we do that by email? Is that
Sure. Well, it doesn't have to be particularly formal right now. I'll, I guess, acknowledge if you could just make sure you CC one another so that everyone understands what's been, how the record has been, I guess, amended. So the floor is yours, Council.
I mean, I guess what we're hearing.
Sure. No problem.
I mean, I guess what we're hearing today is that the only person who really needs to listen to the radio is Officer Hall, because we've got superior officers who are on duty the morning of September 5th, who are responsible for making sure that police business is done. I guess they don't hear the call that comes through for her to meet with the citizen before she clears the station. I guess that explains why they don't understand that the call said that she should do it before she clears the station, and that's what she actually did. Maybe that explains that discrepancy. But I guess they don't need to listen to the radio. Officer Amendola doesn't need to listen to the radio. Officer Elwood doesn't need to listen to the radio. Officer Hall needs to listen to the radio. And even when Officer Hall follows what dispatch instructs, which is to come to the front desk before you clear the station, even when she does that, she's disciplined. And these charges here are not light charges that are in any way commensurate with what happened here. I mean, she's being charged with untruthfulness. This is something that's posted in the department that everyone sees. And the untruthfulness that we now hear explained, finally, is that she said that she was on an assignment from Lieutenant Mealy instead of maybe saying she was acting on his instructions. So that's the untruthfulness that somehow merits losing her pay for 3 weeks. It's just profoundly unfair, and there's no just cause for this discipline. And we're even hearing now about additional rules that I don't think I've ever seen cited anywhere that Officer Hall has apparently violated. Now you need to ask another officer to cover in certain situations. I don't think that was mentioned at any point before today. They're just sort of scrambling at this point. And, I think the fair thing to do is to rescind this discipline. I think it was a grievous overreach on the department's part. And really pushing the matter is only going to further inflame this situation, which, as you've heard, was already a hot situation, given everything else that's gone on. I think it's too bad that these different officers who we're hearing from Mrs. Chu, from Attorney Chu, what they say. I think it would be nice if they were here and could say it themselves and could explain some of these, discrepancies that we've heard about, including apparently not listening to the radio. But they're not here, so that's what we have to deal with. And I'll let Officer Hall talk about how the 15-day suspension was agreed to. I will just point out that this practice of splitting up suspension time is actually a well-worn practice in the department. It's been done numerous times, and despite knowing, and I don't think the department would dispute that they have the latitude to do this, and just to show their attitude here, they rejected out of hand any overture on Officer Hall's part to do that and lessen the burden on her family. So I think that speaks volumes. And I'll just let Officer Hall explain the issue of the 15-day suspension and how that agreement came about. Just briefly, let her address that with you. And then I know you had a few other thoughts on it.
Yes.
So you can go ahead and do that as well.
So with the 15-day suspension that the chief gave me, and I did plead not to have that, and he said, I need to make an example out of you. That's what his exact words were. I've never done anything wrong in 19 years, never had a discipline. And her law firm, I forget who the lady was that was there from her law firm, told me if we go across the street to the selectmen, you will be terminated. Again, I'm the sole provider of my family. I have 3 small children. I couldn't afford that to happen. So under duress, I signed. And I'd like to ask the chief, when's the last time someone had a suspension this length? Because the best of my knowledge, in 19 years, nobody has ever been suspended this long. And when we asked him to split it up, his exact words were to his attorney, to my attorney, if she drops the appeal, we'll have her split it up. If she doesn't, she's taken the whole term. Now, as a chief, you should be impartial. You should be wanting to educate someone if they did something wrong, not take it personal. He knows my situation because my husband worked for this department. He knows I have 3 small children. And for that, and then also for this whole personal paper that I was looking for, it's not personal. That's why Lieutenant Campbell did the investigation. Police officers only have access to the police department back there where our mailboxes are. And you can ask him why I cannot speak to him directly, but everybody else can. I'm the only one that can't speak to him, and he's the one that told me about this so-called chain of command that I violated. But there's no policy that shows the chain of command that him or the chief are exempt from it. Until this day, I still do not have that report, and I don't know why it's waiting. If they closed out my case in the end of August, why I don't have the report, and why my attorney doesn't have the report that we asked to show that this is not a personal matter. And I was instructed only to go to Lieutenant Mealy, and that's why I went to Lieutenant Mealy every day. And unfortunately, Mealy's not here, and Ferris is not here to find out who brought this to his attention. We still don't know who brought this to his attention 3.5 hours later, because I saw him multiple times throughout the day, and we had conversations, never brought this up. And
You mean on September?
on September 5th, he never brought it up to me saying, hey, I overheard you missed this call, or what happened to that, never did. And I'd like to ask Sergeant Ferris, but I can't ask him some questions that pertain to that, but also Officer Elwood's not here to say, how many times did the lady go to him and say, hey, I have to leave? How come he never notified me and say, hey, Amy, can you hurry this up, whatever you're doing, she's getting antsy, she wants to leave? And to this day, did she ever file a report about what she came in to talk about? And how come Officer Elwood couldn't get the information and then me contact her? Or contact Lieutenant Mealy and say, hey, she's getting antsy. We're all like 20 feet away. Officer Elwood's sitting over there. I was writing a report here. Dispatch is over here. We're all in a close proximity. The lieutenant's over there, so everyone knows where everyone is. It's not a, we were in close proximity. So how come no one brought it to my attention when you usually do? And then if someone says to you, hey, I'm getting antsy, I need to leave, you have an obligation at the front desk to notify the sergeant and lieutenant also and say, hey, she's getting antsy, she wants a report, either get Officer Hall up here now or get somebody else. And dispatch said, before you clear the station, they didn't say report to the front desk right now. They said before you clear the station, there's someone that wants to file a report. Now that is a non-emergency call. But for a dispute, and for a residential alarm, those are emergency calls because you don't know what's going. So they're ordering you to go. And when Attorney Chu said that dispatch realized that Officer Elwood was at the front desk, did she do a report on that? How do you know that what she exact said about that dispatcher realizing that she made a mistake? Where's her report? Are you just assuming that, or did she write a report about that? That's why she sent other officers to that call. Because she's not here, we don't have it in this packet, her statement, or her testimony. So was that your opinion, or did she say that? That's what I'd like to know, also.
Yeah, so just to close, fortunately, given everything that's going on in the big picture between Officer Hall and the department, you don't have to decide all that. The question for you is there just cause to suspend her for this? As I said at the outset, and I think we've heard through the evidence that Officer Hall received the dispatch call, said to come to the front desk before you clear the station. That's what she did. Did not contradict the request from dispatch in any way. There's no just cause to discipline her for missing the call. She just simply didn't do it. And this is also the type of infraction with regards to apparently everyone else but Officer Hall, where you miss a call, I'm sure there's a good reason for it, don't worry about it, don't need a report, don't investigate, don't discipline anyone. Officer Hall, suddenly it's a big deal. So even from the department's usual practice, this is not a situation, even assuming what they say is true, is not a situation where there would be just cause to suspend her. It's just not the case here. So thank you very much for hearing us today. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. Is that anything else? Ready? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing except for the limited, except for your ability to submit some more documentation by the end of the day today if you feel that's necessary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.